My name is Lauren Hayes. I'm 31 years old and I'm a hospice nurse in Denver, Colorado. 5 months before our wedding, my fiancé sat across from me at his marble kitchen island and told me two things in the same calm voice he used for ordering wine. His parents would not be at the wedding and my mom and dad were never under any circumstances going to meet his family. He said it like a policy. So one Saturday morning while he thought I was covering a shift, I drove almost 5 hours to a little yellow house in Toledo, Ohio with a stranger's name written on my hand. What I found inside that house was worse than anything I had let myself imagine. And what I did about it at our engagement party in front of every important person he was trying to impress is why I'm telling you this story. Welcome back to the Revenge Diaries, where family secrets come into the light and quiet people finally find their voice. If stories about loyalty, betrayal, and hard-won dignity speak to you, you're in the right place. Drop a comment and tell me where you're listening from today, and be sure to subscribe because you will not want to miss how this one ends. Let me tell you what hospice work teaches you because it matters to this story. I have sat beside hundreds of people in their last days. They talk near the end. They ask for people. And in 11 years of nursing, I have never once heard a dying person call out for their business partner or their country club. They call for their mother, their son, a sister they haven't spoken to since some Christmas nobody can explain anymore. That's the whole list. I grew up in Fort Collins, Colorado, in a house that smelled like motor oil and coffee. My dad, Michael, turned wrenches at a machine shop for 34 years. My mom, Diane, answered phones at the middle school and baked almond bars for every funeral and fundraiser in the county. We were never poor exactly, but we were the kind of family that knew what everything cost. And here's the part I'm not proud of. From about age 12, I appointed myself their manager. Before parent-teacher nights, I'd iron Dad's one good shirt and hide the ball cap with the engine grease on the brim. Before my college friends visited, I coached Mom out of telling her coupon stories, the ones where the whole plot was how much she saved. I called it helping. I told myself I was protecting them from rooms that would look down on them. It took me nearly 20 years and one shoebox full of birthday cards to understand what I was actually rehearsing. My parents never once complained about it. Dad would just put on the iron shirt, wink at me, and say, "Better." And I'd feel something twist a little somewhere under the ribs and ignore it. I was good at ignoring it. Then I met a man who had taken that small, shameful habit of mine and built it into an entire life with a budget and a script and a cast. Though of course, I didn't know that yet. I met Ethan Whitmore 5 years ago at a fundraiser for the hospice where I work. He was 30 then, a rising client director at a private wealth firm downtown, the kind of man whose shirts never wrinkle because they wouldn't dare. I watched him spend 20 minutes talking with one of my patients, a 90-year-old former schoolteacher in a wheelchair, and he never once glanced over her head at someone more important. That's rarer than you'd think. He remembered everything. My coffee order, my mother's birthday, the name of my first dog. He planned trips like a travel agent and apologized like a diplomat. My friends called him the catalog man. As in, where's the catalog you ordered him from? And I laughed because when something looks that finished, you assume someone else did the quality control. There were quirks. He hated being photographed off guard. He kept no clutter, no souvenirs, no junk drawer, which in my family is practically a crime against nature. And in 5 years, I never saw a single photograph of Ethan as a child. Not one. No gap-toothed school picture, no awkward prom shot, nothing. When I asked, he told me there had been a house fire when he was in college, and the albums were gone, and his family wasn't sentimental anyway. He said the word sentimental the way some people say infected. I remember thinking that was sad. A man with no evidence of his own childhood. I'm a nurse. I read charts for a living, and a chart with pages missing usually means somebody removed them. I knew that. I want you to understand that I knew that. And I asked more than once and every question landed on an answer so smooth and so complete that pushing further felt like an accusation. You try being the woman who demands receipts for a house fire. Still, quietly, I kept noticing. And the noticing kept adding up. Here is the family Ethan gave me, the authorized version. His parents were Charles and Victoria Whitmore, retired art dealers based in Santa Barbara, California. Though base turned out to be a load-bearing word. According to Ethan, they were cultured, difficult and cold. The kind of people who send a card in December with no handwriting in it. He and his father were cordial but distant. Old money. Old grudges. Don't ask. And I had met them. That's the thing. The thing I keep coming back to. I met his parents twice in the flesh at big glittering events with 200 other guests. Charles had silver hair and a pocket square, and told a lovely polished story about Ethan's graduation from Stanford. Victoria wore pearls and smelled like a department store in the nicest way, and held my hands, and called me a breath of fresh air. 20 minutes both times, and then they were swept off to a flight, or a benefit, or a foundation dinner. When I suggested a private dinner, just the four of us, Ethan said his mother didn't do well one-on-one, that she performed better with an audience. I remember laughing at his word choice. Performed. When I offered to fly down to Naples with him before the wedding, he told me they'd just left from our for the season. People like that actually say things like that, so I believed him the way you believe a weather report. I did the normal checks a woman does. In March, with the wedding 5 months out, I finally pushed. Both families, one dinner, I said. Pick any restaurant, any city. I will handle everything. It's one evening, Adrian. My mom has been asking me for a year. He agreed the way he agreed to everything warmly and instantly. And then the date slid. A client crisis, then his parents' schedule, then a conference, then a vague digestive complaint of Marlene's that traveled with her like luggage. 3 cancellations in 6 weeks, each one padded with flowers for my mother, and a reservation somewhere nicer next time. My dad started calling it the dinner that lives in the future. And then one Tuesday night, I came off a 12-hour shift, still in scrubs, and tried once more at the kitchen island, and Adrian set down his glass and let something slip through the polish. He said, "Elena, drop it. They wouldn't know what to do in a room like that." I stood there holding a takeout container, like it was a chart with bad news in it. I asked him very quietly what exactly he meant by they. He walked it back within seconds, smooth as ever. He meant the restaurant was stuffy. He meant his parents were snobs. He meant everyone would be more comfortable apart. He was tired. He was sorry. It was a beautiful apology. It had structure. It landed its points in order, like something written in advance for a wound he knew he'd eventually cause. My dad apologizes by standing in the doorway holding a wrench, saying, "Well, anyway, and I know what a real one sounds like." That night, I lay awake next to this perfect man doing math that had nothing to do with numbers. He didn't want my parents in that room. Fine, but then why in 5 years had his own parents never once been allowed in a small room either? Who exactly was being protected and from whom? 2 weeks later, he did it with the whine voice. That's what I call it now. That smooth pour of a voice he used for decisions that were already made. He came home, kissed my temple, and told me his parents would not be attending our wedding. His mother's health, he said. Crowds overwhelmed her. His father wouldn't come without her. They sent their love and a very generous check, and he said the word check as if it were a synonym for parents. I stood at the counter waiting to feel surprised and couldn't find it. What I felt instead was the floor tilting gently, the way it does when a thing you've suspected puts on its coat and introduces itself. I asked if I could at least call his mother. He said she wasn't taking calls. I asked for her number anyway, and watched 1/2 second of stillness cross his face before he smiled, and said he'd set something up after the honeymoon. Meanwhile, I had to tell my parents. Mom went quiet on the phone in the way that's worse than crying. And then she said the thing that put a crack straight down the middle of my heart. "Elena, you're marrying into a family I'm not allowed to look at." What did we do? She thought it was them. Of course, she thought it was them. She'd spent her whole life being gently managed out of nicer rooms. Some of that management done by me. And I heard my own childhood coming out of the phone, and had no answer for it. She stopped asking about centerpieces after that. She mailed back the seating chart with no note. My mother, who owns a 3-ring binder for other people's weddings, went quiet on mine. So I stopped asking Adrian questions. Questions only fed the machine that made answers. I decided to start looking at my fiancé the way I look at a chart. And charts don't lie for you. I want to be honest about the trap I was standing in. Because from the outside, people always ask why the woman doesn't just leave. Here is why. For months earlier, when everything still glowed, I had given up my apartment in Bayview, the little one-bedroom I'd kept through every stage of my adult life like a fire exit. My savings had gone to the wedding deposits. The venue alone was $11,000 in both our names. My dress was hanging in his closet, already fitted. My whole schedule, my commute, my mail, my retirement paperwork, all of it now routed through a glass tower in downtown Milwaukee with his name on the deed. I wasn't a guest in my life anymore. I was a tenant in his. And the man himself had not actually done anything you could hold up in the light and call cruelty. That's what I'd want you to sit with. He was kind to me daily. He rubbed my feet after doubles. If I had gone to my girlfriends with what I had, a cancelled dinner, a slipped nickname, a missing photo album, they'd have told me every family has weather, and mine wasn't even raining. But I spend my working life with people who have run out of time to lie to themselves, and something in me had quietly moved to that side of the bed. I found myself watching my fiancé the way I watch a patient's breathing, counting things nobody else counts. Little pauses before answers about his childhood. The way his accent flattened, one careful notch on calls with certain clients, the way he never ever said the name of his high school. If you've ever stood in a room you helped pay for, wearing a smile you didn't feel, wondering who exactly you were about to promise your life to, then stay with me, because you already know this feeling in your spine. And 3 weeks later, on a dead, quiet night shift, a television in a hospice family lounge broke my whole world open. Tell me in the comments if you've ever had a doubt you couldn't prove. And hit subscribe because everything from here on out, I watched happen with my own eyes. First, the gala, because looking back, that was the dress rehearsal fate let me sit in on. In late April, Adrian's firm threw its spring benefit at a hotel on Water Street. And to my surprise, his parents flew in for it. There they were by the ice sculpture. Victor in midnight blue, Marlene in pearls, both of them lit up like a store window. Then, near the dessert table, Marlene touched Adrian's sleeve and said, laughing at something, "Oh Danny, stop, Danny." The room kept moving but I didn't. Adrian's hand tightened around his glass, just for a breath. Knuckles pale. And then he laughed too and said his mother had called him that when he was small. Some private family joke. Wasn't she incorrigible? Marlene's eyes did a strange thing while he said it. They went to him first. Quick, like a student checking the teacher's face before answering. I know that glance. I see it in family meetings when the son who pays for the facility corrects the daughter who actually visits. It's the glance of someone checking the script. Adrian had told me 100 times that nobody in his family used nicknames, that he'd been Adrian, even in the crib. On the cab ride home, he was funny and warm and utterly normal, and I sat beside him with my hand in his, thinking one thought on a loop. Her eyes went to him first. 3 weeks after the gala, I was on a night shift, 2 in the morning, the hour when the building itself seems to breathe slower. I'd stepped into the family lounge to make coffee for a patient's daughter who couldn't stop shaking, and the television up in the corner was murmuring to an empty room. A commercial came on for one of those regional insurance companies, the kind with a jingle and a toll-free number, soft focus. A silver-haired grandfather in a canvas jacket, teaching a little boy to fish off a dock, promising that some things should last for generations. I looked up with the coffee pot in my hand, and the whole world went narrow like a hallway. The grandfather was Victor Cole. Not a resemblance to him. The pocket-square posture, the warm crinkle at the eyes he'd aimed at me across 2 separate ballrooms. The exact voice that had called my future mother-in-law his bride of 40 years. I stood there so long the coffee burned. Then I did what any of you would have done. I grabbed my phone with my pulse banging in my ears and typed the insurance company's name into the search bar, misspelling it twice, and found the ad on their website, and under it a production credit page. And on that page a cast list. The grandfather was played by a Chicago-area actor named Marcus Reed. Available for commercial, corporate, and private event work. It said through his talent page, private event work. I carried the coffee to the shaking daughter, and I held her hand, and I said all the right nurse things while somewhere behind my sternum a door I had been holding shut for months swung wide open. My future father-in-law was selling term life insurance at 2 a.m, and his name apparently had never been called at all. I did not confront Adrian. I want credit for that because every cell in my body wanted to shake him awake and hold the phone to his face. But nursing teaches you a rule that has saved me twice in my life. You don't pull the needle until you've found the vein. If I was wrong, I'd be the woman who accused her fiancé's aging mother of being a hired act. If I was right, then the man I lived with had resources and nerve I hadn't begun to map. And he would smooth this over the way he smoothed everything, and I would never see the bottom of it. So for 4 days, I worked the problem in the margins of my shifts, quiet as a chart audit. Marcus Reed's actor page listed decades of credits, community theater, industrial training videos, and a specialty line that made my skin prickle, discrete roles for corporate and private engagements. The woman I knew as Marlene matched a headshot on the same agency's roster, a lovely retired actress out of Evanston with a different name entirely. The Cole Art Consultancy in Sarasota had a 1-page website, no address, no gallery, no tax trail my modest skills could find, just elegant gray font, and the domain had been registered the same year Adrian moved to Chicago. And the man himself, my catalog man, simply did not exist past a certain depth. No Adrian Cole in the Northwestern Alumni Directory. No childhood address, no obituary mentions, no Dusty Swim Team result from some summer league, and everybody has a Dusty Swim Team result. His paper trail started 11 years ago, complete and confident, like a highway that begins in the middle of a field. A man with no past has one somewhere. I was done wondering whether it existed. Now I needed to know where it was buried. I booked Marcus Reed through his talent page using my real name, saying I wanted to discuss an event role. We met at a coffee shop in Wauwatosa on my day off. In person, he was smaller than his ballroom self, a working actor in a cardigan. And when I sat down and slid my engagement photo across the table instead of a job offer, he looked at it for a long moment and aged about 5 years. I wondered if this day was coming, he said. He was careful. I'll give him that. He didn't gossip. He'd been hired through an event agency. Everything by the book, a character brief, thicker than most film scripts, he said. Family history, allergies, anecdotes, the rain on the quad. The rule was never stay longer than an hour. Never accept a private meal. Never improvise biography. I've played a lot of fathers, he told me, turning his cup in circles. Weddings, funerals, board dinners. It's more common than you'd ever want to know. But I've never had a client keep the same father running for years. Most people need a dad for one afternoon. That young man built himself a permanent one. I asked if he knew Adrian's real name. He was quiet for a while, deciding something about himself, and I watched him decide it. Then he said the first year before everything got routed through the agency, the retainer checks had come from a personal account drawn on some little bank out of Indiana, and the name printed on them wasn't Cole. He remembered it because of a Polish deli near his apartment. Same name on the awning. He'd smiled at the coincidence every time he cashed one. Novak, he said. D. Novak. He looked at my ring, then at me gently like a man delivering test results. Honey, I just play the part. You're marrying this production. That night, Adrian slept the untroubled sleep of a man whose systems were all running normally. And I sat out on the balcony with my phone and a blanket and typed Daniel Novak into the search bar because Danny had never left my head since the gala. It's a common name. I scrolled through athletes and realtors and a retired police captain, adding words like a woman picking a lock by feel. Danny Daniel Ray Novak, Indiana. I tried finally because of Marcus's little bank, and the fourth result stopped my breathing. It was an obituary from a South Bend funeral home, 7 years old. Helen Novak, age 84, lifelong parishioner, famous for her pierogi at the church festival, preceded in death by her husband, survived by her son Raymond and his wife Carol, and by her beloved grandson Daniel. There was a photograph of Helen outside a small brick church, and she had Adrian's jawline, or rather he had hers. I sat with the wind coming off the lake, and did the arithmetic no one had asked me to do about his grandmother. 7 years ago he was already Adrian Cole of Chicago, already mine. And I searched my memory for that spring, and found it instantly. A wine tasting in Napa he'd planned for my birthday. No shadow on him at all. Not one. The woman who taught him to fish or bake or pray, or whatever she taught him, went into the ground with his name in her obituary, and he tasted 17 kinds of Cabernet and smiled at me over every glass. An online directory gave me the rest in 30 seconds. Ray Novak, an address on Maple Street, South Bend, Indiana. I looked through the glass at my sleeping fiancé for a long time. Then I texted Nadia, my closest friend on the ward. Can you take my Saturday? I need to swap. I told Adrian I was covering Nadia's shift, the first outright lie of my adult life to a man I loved. And it fit in my mouth so easily it frightened me. I left at 6 o'clock in the morning with coffee and a printed map like it was a mission because my hands wanted a paper thing to hold. If you've never driven into South Bend, I'll tell you what it looks like. You come off the interstate into streets that were built proud. Little bungalows with real porches, and then you pass the plants, or what's left of them. Whole city blocks of factory behind chain link windows the color of dishwater. Parking lots big enough for thousands of cars holding maybe 40. My dad worked machines his whole life, so I know what those lots used to sound like at shift change. It's a specific kind of quiet they have now. Maple Street was 5 minutes past the fences, and the house was pale yellow, small, and cared for in a way money can't fake. Fresh paint on the porch rails, tomato stakes in the side yard, gutters cleaned by hand, and the porch light was on. 11 o'clock on a bright Saturday morning, sun everywhere, and that one bulb burning away over the front steps like a candle in a church. I sat in the car across the street for probably 10 minutes, rehearsing openings the way I rehearsed telling a family bad news, and every version sounded insane. Then the front door opened and a woman came out with a watering can, 60s, soft gray perm, wiping one hand on her apron. She had Adrian's eyes. She had his exact eyes and his way of tilting the head on a face that had done its worrying honestly. I was out of the car before I decided to be. She watched me come up the walk the way women like her watch strangers. Kindly braced. I said I was sorry to bother her. And was she Daniel's mother? The watering can stopped mid-pour. Is he alive? She said. That was her first question. Is he alive? Her name was Carol. She sat me at a kitchen table with a white clean checkered cloth, and put out coffee and a plate of windmill cookies before she would let me say one more word, because there are women in this country who cannot receive news without feeding you first, and my own mother is one of them. Her husband came in from the garage when she called, drying his hands on a rag. Ray Novak was a tall man gone careful in the joints, and when he shook my hand, I felt the story of his working life in it. Scar tissue laid smooth and shiny across the knuckles, 2 nails that had grown back wrong. 30 years pouring metal at the plant, I'd learn, until the buyout came, the same year the country's wheels came off, and the plant gates closed behind him for good. I put my hands around the coffee cup, and told them the truth in the plainest order I could manage. My name is Elena. I live in Milwaukee. I'm engaged to your son. He's healthy. He's successful. And the wedding is in August. Carol gripped the edge of the table, and I watched 11 years of terror leave her body all at once. And what rushed in behind it wasn't joy. It was grief with nowhere to put itself. She asked, was he sick? Was he in trouble? Was he in debt to someone? Because why else? And I understood she'd spent a decade building explanations with mercy in them, and I had just burned them all. Ray stood by the counter, not sitting, one hand flat on the laminate like he was studying it, and asked no questions at all. It was Carol who finally said it in a voice worn down to the boards, while her thumb moved back and forth across the tablecloth as if soothing it. He didn't die, honey. He just buried us instead. Then she stood up, pressed her apron down twice, and said, there was something I ought to show you. She led me down a short hallway lined with school photos. And there he was, year after year, a gap-toothed boy becoming a lanky teenager, Daniel Ray Novak, in a mullet phase. Absolutely nobody in Milwaukee would survive learning about. His bedroom was kept like a room in a museum with a staff of one. Baseball trophies dusted weekly. A certificate for a state science fair. A photograph of the three of them outside the plant gates on the day Ray got his 30-year pin. Danny maybe 17. His father's scarred hand proud on his shoulder. Everybody squinting into the sun like happiness was too bright to look at directly. And on the closet shelf, a shoebox.